Welcome to today's episode. I have brought on Dave Susko. I'm so excited to have you, Dave. Welcome.
Hey, how are you? Good morning, Heather. It's good to
Good.
be here.
Dave and I actually met through some Facebook networking group. We're super into the outdoors and also love photography. He's way better. But I wanted to bring Dave on. We both have similar stories. We ended an engagement. We weren't engaged, but we had our own separate engagements.
Thanks for
But
clearing that up.
yeah, Dave, kind of, if you want, give a little background. Where do you live? What do you do?
So I live in wonderful Breckenridge, Colorado. I I guess I'm a jack of all trades. My main, I guess, employment is in the IT field. I recently just got hired on to be I guess, a part-time photographer for action sports. And when I'm not doing that, kind of as you mentioned earlier, I'm just constantly outside, just taking advantage of everything that we have here, up in the Rocky Mountains.
Awesome. Well, and give a little background. So you ended your engagement and then you went through this entire kind of, if you want to call it a spiritual journey or kind of self-reflection.
Yeah. I was engaged, ended it actually about a year ago. We weren't on the same page, didn't want the same things. And thankfully my IT job affords me the ability to kind of, go wherever I want and roam. So I pretty much did just that. I packed up and I went out west to Utah and Nevada and California, and then I turned around and drove all the way back to the East Coast, to New York and Vermont and Maine, visit a bunch of friends and family, and kind of along the way, road trips, talking to your dog, you do a lot of self-realization. You don't get a lot of feedback from your dog. And I don't know, I was lucky enough to come across some books and some online content, just about, I guess, like positive energy and perspective and focus and looking at the bright side of things. I oddly enough ran into a bunch of people who were going through similar struggles and the same type of growth, and they were sharing their stories and their perspectives, which just really opened my eyes, to how lucky I am, and all the abilities I have to go wherever I want. I could work from home, so wherever home is, and then just met a bunch of people that I wouldn't normally meet. I also, I guess, have the gift of being a social butterfly, and so it's just easy to interact with people, and you ask some questions and you get some pretty cool answers, and that kind of opened the door for me to, I guess, really kind of look inside and understand, one, why things kept happening the way they were happening, and two, how I could change the outcome from things moving forward. And that's where I guess I kind of focused on just changing my perception of things, trying to find the silver lining. And I know that's cliche, but when you do that, everything changes. Things don't seem as dramatic or as critical. You can kind of just accept things for what they are, and you move on and you look for the next right thing. I think, it's kind of how I look at things right now.
Yeah, but I think that's huge. And something that I'm all about is creating that mind, body, spirit trifecta. And so for you to be able to take what happened and turn it into that 180 of life is happening for me, like, and finding the gratitude. And I mean, how awesome was that?
Yeah, it was great. So I have always been into like the photography thing, for example, but to your point, life is happening to me. That door closed again, kind of cliche, another one opened. So I had all of this time to travel around the US, to go to all of these places, a lot of which I did by myself, and to really focus on my photography. And so I dedicated a lot of energy to that. And I just realized that had I been in that engagement and, a relationship, whatever, I wouldn't have had, so much time to focus my energy on that. And that's, it's always been a passion of mine. And now it's huge. It's a huge part of my day to day. But, I could have just sulked and down on myself and down on the entire situation and not put any energy into that. And just the gratification I got out of, going to these beautiful places in the country and out in the woods and the mountains and kind of interacting with like the earth's energy, if you will. It just put a huge smile on my face, and it made me realize that, life is amazing, and it's this thing to be excited about, and things happen, you accept them and you move on. I mean, there's so many beautiful things that are right in front of us, and when we constantly look behind us, we miss out on all of those things. So yeah, I was happy to have all that new free time.
Well, and I think what we've touched on before is, and I think why a lot of people come to Colorado specifically, is that outdoor, being in nature. And so you mentioned that it was grounding. So can you kind of explain how nature and grounding helped you?
Yeah, sure. So I was, just reading some articles and doing some research online, actually about some hikes, and I came across this article about grounding. So I guess the whole theory there is, man was, defined to kind of be one with nature. I know that's kind of hokey, but we're supposed to interact with nature. We're supposed to touch the ground and touch the trees and absorb their energy. And over time we evolved and created these what we like to call necessities: clothing, shoes, whatever. And those things contain our energy, and they create all this inflammation in our bodies, which, as everybody knows, inflammation leads to other things: illnesses, anxiety, whatever. So what I started doing was, when I went on these hikes and I was camping and whatnot, I always kind of made time, I'd like take my shoes off and take my socks off and just feel the ground beneath my feet. And when I hiked, I always, when I first started hiking, I just did my thing. I just, went down the trail, A to B, and that was that. Now I started, reaching out and like touching the trees and touching the plants and kind of like holding on to like the ground, and you just absorb Mother Nature's energy. And, I think so many people, city life, in particular, it's surrounded by concrete and all of this man-made stuff, these structures, it blocks a lot of that energy. So, to your point, in Colorado, it's really popular to escape to the mountains and to the woods. And I think a lot of people reset and recharge like that. And, we have lovely sunsets here, and the mountains are amazing, and, the winters are amazing. And I think if more people just took time, not to just go out into the nature, into Mother Nature, but to interact and to touch, trees or rocks or snow or whatever, and absorb that energy, it helps you ground and kind of realize that, everything's going to be all right. And it's just a very simple way to live. We don't need to overcomplicate things at all.
Well, and I think a huge bonus of the mountains, there are places you can go where you don't get cell service. So that's where you can totally disconnect. And there's something for
Absolutely.
me. Yeah, there's something for me about being in nature and in the mountains and the silence of it. It's just,
Absolutely. Yeah. It allows you, to literally to unplug and just allow everything else to just kind of surround you. And yeah, I really like that too. I mean, being a photographer, I tend to have my camera with me at all times, but not having cell service and not uploading a picture to Instagram or anything like that, but to just be in the moment and be present and just take everything in for what it is at that moment, not thinking about the future, not thinking about the past or bills or, anything like that, but truly just unplugging and being in the moment. It's amazing. And it's changed everything. I mean, my performance at work is different, and people notice that. Just my mood, just being in town and, around friends, people notice that. Just overall, I sleep better, I'm just at ease so much more than I ever have been in my life. So it's a pretty cool thing.
do you think all of that happened because of the ending the engagement and doing all that self-reflection? Were you as present in the moment before or after?
Definitely after, I'm ashamed to admit, but I'm also, I'm happy to admit that. And being able to see what you've done in the past and accept it, not beat yourself up over it, but just, understand that there's room for growth. Yeah, I was definitely a victim of the what ifs and always looking ahead, not ever taking advantage or just appreciating what was right in front of me. So spending a lot of time alone and just going, to all these like national parks across the country and seeing how people live in other cities, friends and family who I haven't seen in years, lead completely different lives. And it's funny. It seems like a lot of people, I guess, in our kind of age bracket, are starting to do this more. More meditation, more yoga, just like simple living. Kind of cleansing their house of all the junk and the clutter, and just living more simple lives and appreciating what they have and being mindful of that. And I didn't really ever know what that meant until really the last year. Spent a lot of time meditating, and I did a lot of guided meditation. And then, I had all these breakthroughs. I live in this amazing place, and sure, my engagement didn't work out, but all of these other things did. And so those were it's just the natural path we're supposed to take. And we try and control it. You get all this anxiety and all this angst, and I think a lot of people feel let down. You're just excited about it. The unknown, I mean, that's the excitement is what drives me now, not knowing what's going to happen in the next 24 hours, and that's good enough. I don't have to look 5 years down the road, but yeah, I thrive off that excitement. And I think if other people could embrace the unknown and just realize, I mean, we can all handle anything. We're designed to do that. You just have to be open to it and see it as an opportunity. So
not an obstacle. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think what we've talked about also previously is, and what I want to touch on is kind of being able to bust out of fear and comfort zones. And I know for you, coming on to do my podcast, it was so outside your comfort zone, but thank you for pushing past that. And maybe can you touch more on that?
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. Absolutely out of my comfort zone. I tend to, prefer being behind cameras, not in front of them. So that's definitely a struggle for me, but, just a good segue. It's the excitement of that, and it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. So, that's cool. But I guess just throughout my life, I've always been apprehensive of the unknown. I've never wanted to push myself. And I mean, this started, I grew up in upstate New York, and I left in 2005, and I've only been back a handful of times. I've moved all across the country. I've taken all of these road trips by myself. I didn't know, thank God for GPS, but I didn't know people when I moved to Colorado. I didn't know people when I moved to Nevada. I didn't know people when I moved to Arizona. You get used to the unknown, and you get used to being excited about that. And like I said, now I thrive on that. I mean, it's a little scary and nerve-wracking, but that's how you feel alive. I mean, you get that rush of adrenaline, and your awareness is just so heightened because you don't know. You're not in that day-to-day kind of mundane routine, and everything is just crisp and new. It's like being a little kid again. I mean, a little more responsibility, but yeah, it's just, if people would embrace that, I think they'd have a bigger smile on their face. I mean, I certainly do. It's exciting just not knowing. But I mean, it's a phrase that I've always hung on to in some of the books that I've read. But the theme in a lot of these books is the best days are yet to come. They're still ahead of you, because as a human being, you're constantly evolving, and you're excited about that. I mean, you start to appreciate things you've never seen before. I mean, the only place you can go is up. I mean, there's hurdles, of course, it ebbs and flows, but yeah, I'm excited about, my upcoming plans. As we discussed, to potentially move up to the Pacific Northwest, or hopefully to Canada. I don't know a soul up there, but Mother Nature's pretty cool up there. So fingers crossed, we'll see what happens, and hopefully it goes well.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you brought up is, and I've done it for myself too, but when you feel the fear and do it anyway, it's kind of, I've almost taken on this adrenaline and addiction to it. I'm like, all right, what can I bust out of next? What can I try now?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I'm ashamed to admit I have another addiction. But yeah, the fear, it overwhelms you, but I mean, we can all fight through it. And then, yeah, once you do it, you realize it wasn't that bad. And then you set that bar a little bit higher, your comfort zone just grows a little more, a little more, a little more. And it's exactly like you said, you get addicted to that because you feel so empowered, and you feel that growth from, even if it's just a small thing like doing a podcast and being in front of a camera. um I already feel great about it, and it's like, what can I do next? How can I take this one step further? I think that's huge with the personal growth and perspective, not looking at this necessarily as something you don't want to do, a chore, but an opportunity. So yeah, I'm pretty grateful, for you asking me to do it, getting me out of my comfort zone, helping me, if you will.
For sure. Okay, so I want to turn this into, I have a couple questions for you. I like to call them rapid fire. So
Okay.
I'm going to ask, you don't really get to think, whatever comes to mind, shoot it.
All right.
They're not scary. Okay, what is a book you're currently reading?
I'm not reading one currently. I just finished The Alchemist. Not sure if you're familiar with it,
Was
but
that your first time reading?
it was.
I've read it multiple times. It's one of my go-tos, and a quote I actually had printed off and I put on my wall in my last house was, and I don't want to mess it up, but something about whatever you desire, the universe conspires in making it happen.
Yep. Yeah, that was, yeah. And then I think it was in the preface, wasn't it?
Probably.
And then,
But yeah, that is an amazing book.
yeah, it was. Yeah, being my first time, several friends had suggested it to me, and everybody said it was going to kind of change my life, and it did. I mean, and it's definitely a book you can reread. It's an easy read.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it does just that. It allows you to see that if you put the energy out there, and the things you want, they manifest themselves. The universe is listening. I'm really big into that lately.
First, oh, I get you. Where's your next adventure going to take you?
Short term, I think I'm gonna go up to Jackson Hole. They've been getting a ton of snow. So that's my short term one. My next big adventure, like I said, will be at the end of the ski season. I'm gonna take a swing at the Pacific Northwest and potentially Canada.
Dang.
Yeah.
You'll be back, right? Colorado's just kind of that sweet spot.
I don't know. We'll see. The plan right now is, 4 to 6 months, see how it feels. If I don't like it or it's not a good fit, then I'll come back here. But yeah, I don't know. That's the excitement. I have no idea, and I'm super excited to see what happens. I mean, it could go any direction. So
Yeah. Okay,
we'll see.
my last question for you is, what is a quote you live by?
Oh man. So I guess I don't want to think about it. I'm trying to go quickly. It's not necessarily a quote, but it's from the book Four Agreements. So it's I was apprehensive about that book when I first read it, and then I reread it. So it's not to take anything personally, to do your very best, to be impeccable with your word, and not to make assumptions. Those are super hard quotes, if you will, or guidelines to live by.
Mm-hmm.
But as you ease yourself into them, everything just is so much easier to deal with. I mean, everybody's got their own thing, and we tend to give ourselves a little too much credit when it comes to other people's lives and the role that we play in it. So yeah, if you just don't get caught up in gossip and just do you, and take everything as it comes, don't assume anything, just things get so much easier, so much less dramatic.
Do you know? So, if you want to, I guess I could admit to this. That was the first book I read. I was 8 years old. My mom gave it to me one Christmas. So I would say I was on the self-development realm since I was 8. I love those kind of books. But that one of those agreements that I've always lived by, which is the most difficult, I feel, is to not take anything personally.
Yeah.
But when you're able to not do that, how, I mean, your feelings aren't hurt because you're not making up stories, or what others do has nothing to do with you kind of thing. Like, that was an amazing one.
It really is. And, you know, I think that one goes like hand in hand with like being mindful and meditation and just accepting things for what they are. That's one that I definitely struggle with. You know, my mind is going a mile a minute. So it's tough to not take things personally. You know, I'm a little sensitive too. So, but I mean, everybody's living a similar life in the sense that they're so caught up in their thing, they don't necessarily see the bigger picture. So sometimes people just say things and they don't, you know, they don't think before they speak, and then they don't mean it to be one way or the other. And just being aware of that and accepting it, absolutely. You know, your feelings don't get hurt, and you kind of just brush things off, and you just shine it on, and you know, 10 seconds later, it's gone. It's in the past. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a pretty powerful one for sure.
Well, way to end on a high note. Dave, thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thanks for pushing me out of my comfort zone.
For sure.